comments.
All right.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the November 8th meeting of the Results Committee. The media has been properly notified, it's been properly noticed, and we are ready to gavel this meeting open. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you all will join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay. Let's see. We need a motion to approve the agenda. I think it's just you and me, Chloe, for the committee.
Okay.
So would you mind making that motion?
Yes. I move that we approve the agenda.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous, Robin. 2-0. We do not have any public comments, so we're going to move right on to item 2, the approval of committee meeting minutes. And I have not had a chance to really look at those. So if you, let's see.
Hold on, I'll pull it up.
There's nothing.
Yeah, I don't see the screen anymore, Ms. Bobby. Hold on. Thank you. Big minutes.
I know, right? So I am just going to glance at this right quick.
Two sentence, two dot me.
Yeah, we didn't really have much in the way. That was sort of cleaning up all of the evaluations and getting it ready for October, which is now behind us. So I am, Chloe, are you prepared to make a motion to approve the committee meeting minutes?
Yes, I move that we approve the committee meeting minutes. I think that was on. This one's October 2nd. October 2nd, yeah.
And October 6th.
We met twice. Thank you. On October 2nd and October 6th.
Yep. I will second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. We are now on to item number 3, discussion of the superintendent's 23-24 evaluation. So first of all, I'd like to say we did successfully get out the superintendent's 22-23 evaluation that's been completed. He was once again found to be highly effective, and we can put that issue to bed. So now looking forward, we're looking at the current year we're in, how we're going to evaluate the superintendent. And we had a lot of struggles and a lot of conversations, and we have another conversation coming about what criteria and tools we should use and or adjust to evaluate the superintendent. So the point of this meeting is for us to touch base and maybe come up with some framework or recommendation or some points of discussion to guide the meeting that I think, is it officially Monday at 5:30?
Yes.
Okay, so that was a motion that came out of our work session that we were going to meet within 2 weeks of the work session to kind of get this year's evaluation. What we definitely defined last year in the previous part of this year was that once we get to about January, we are stuck with the instrument we have. So whatever results committee comes in January, they're not really going to be in a position to make any adjustments to the current evaluation instrument. And hopefully at that point, they will really take on looking at the 24-25 evaluation instrument. So right now we need to see what sort of things we might recommend to the board in terms of our experiences and what adjustments we might make to the 23-24 evaluation instrument. So just to clarify, and just for everybody, we got the 22-23, which is done, 23-24, which is underway, and 24-25 is, the one that maybe the next results committee will really be looking at when that committee's formed. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions and comments and see. I have a few ideas of my own, but let's start off with hearing from Ms. Gordon. And I see that Earl Campbell's joined us. So if any other board members kind of have some thoughts as to how we might make Monday's meeting more of a success. Chloe, do you want to get us started?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. This is my first experience during the superintendent's evaluation. I thought the process was good. I did have, as a first timer, doing the evaluation, using the instrument. I didn't realize the sections A, B. I think Ms. Middleton helped me with that. I just think we just need to be more, how do you say it? When we're looking at the numerals, I guess the numbers that we were giving him, I think it's like 1 through 1, 2, 3, and fours. Fours being the highest that we could give Dr. Rodriguez. I really didn't have an issue. Sorry about that. I didn't really have an issue, but I do understand that we do need to have something in place so that we can better. I'm just speaking for me.
Yeah, that's
Understand the process of rating our superintendent.
so you're saying that we need a little more clarification of like we should know in advance how we're going to rate it and understand what that's going to imply. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, because if you look at, thank you, Robin, the governances and board, the one that's up now. And so you go to the blue one, policy involvement, professional standards. Okay. So then over to the right, yes, you tell us that ineffective makes decisions without regard to adopted policies or whatever. So, and then you rate him accordingly. I just think there needs to be a little bit more clarity, because if you look at, there's only a couple sentences more for him to get highly effective from effective. And in that it's proactive in the determination of district needs and policy priorities, has a system in place to ensure timely administration of district ARs. And when you look at the left, it just says is actively involved in development, recommendations, and administration of districts ARs. It's not much difference between the 3 and the 4. So I had a hard time with that. Determining the 4 between the 3. It
Okay.
wasn't much. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. So maybe we could, in this cycle that we're currently in at this meeting on Monday, look at how we're slicing the cheese between effective, highly effective, minimally effective, and maybe providing a little more clarity with that.
Yes.
And I don't think, one question that I would have that I would put to the board is, while if you're thinking about the next results committee, we cannot change what he's being evaluated on, but can we come January, February, really look at how we're going to decide what counts as highly effective? Is
Yes.
that something? Okay.
Yes.
I think that's an excellent point. Other board members? I see Mr. Dallas is unmuted.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to see more of a numerical barometer that's included, because when I look through the entire process, I think there are 39 different areas to rate him. And to me, that generates a lot of verbiage, a lot of activity, which is necessary. But I'm more concerned about what's the outcome. So and hopefully at the January checkpoint, there can be a real firm discussion about when is that strategic review going to be triggered, so that can start looking at what do we need differently. I just got off the phone with a religious leader, and he was applauding the superintendent, the board, the staff, everyone, the community for the outcome. But he also heard some of the people who were manning, that were coming in to vote, remark that they didn't know what was to be voted on. And so I think communication, having some real specific metrics on not what they do, but what's the end result. For example, there could be a survey of the general public that says that basically targets what's the awareness of the general public, not just pupils and parents, but the general public of what goes on in the schools. So, for example, when we were at the Marine celebration uh, the day before, 2 days ago, to see some of our SPED kids in their wheelchairs participating, that doesn't happen to all offerings of non-public schools. And very few of the public is aware that that's the extent that the public schools go to. So I think having metrics that are capture what's happening would be essential, particularly on what is the awareness of the public of what's going on. The second thing is area. I also would suggest is one that was highlighted in your technology committee, is there's been some phenomenal, superbly done granularity on the basically grouping of the software. I think some of the things you mentioned last night, Madam Chair, such as the efficiency, the utilization, those are metrics that can actually be identified. And people will say, well, how are you going to judge efficiency? If we're making a purchase, there should be some financial benefit to the organization. Either lower cost, or maybe, reports are going out from a utilization perspective, no one's using. So you can delete those, free up people, and then have more resources. We want to keep the people, but have more resources devoted to higher, more immediate beneficial efforts. So hopefully that could be a thematic direction that results would sort of encourage us to go to. Thank you, ma'am. And Madam Chair, I will have to leave at 10:30, but I wanted to participate and show my support.
No, I've made your notes, and if I can just recap a little bit, you're looking at you see, I thought one thing you said that I really liked was January as a checkpoint, right?
Yeah.
So the results committee, like us, would be setting it up, and in January we have some sort of checkpoint. And I think that would tie in really well with Ms. Gordon's sort of like, okay, let's look at the effective columns and see how we can make tweaks. So the results committee in the fall lays down some foundational ground, or in the summer lays down some foundational groundwork of what the superintendent's evaluation will be on. January is a checkpoint. At that point, we could potentially develop more numeric barometers. We could look at utilization and efficiency, and how all this is being communicated. And I think that could also be something at the January checkpoint. The communication piece could be really focused on too. So I think that I'm starting to feel like a little bit of a framework's evolving. So thank you for your input.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Guaz?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Several comments, and I don't know if they're suggestions, comments, I guess. One is, I do think I really would encourage the results committee to come forward on Monday, the 13th, when we're having the special called meeting, with some type of recommendation to the board. I think if it's just kind of a free-for-all open, I don't think we're going to be accomplishing what we hope to accomplish. That's one thing. Number two, looking at the instrument that we used this year, just last month, I would have just some food for thought on it. On the first of all, I probably would maybe consider changing the weighting of the percentages again. For example, the professional practice components, those 5 areas that have a total of 32 questions, weighted as 45% on the final score, composite score. And then when you get to the other 3 categories that we called measurable components of teacher recruitment and retention, financial oversight, and student achievement, those totaled the 55%. I don't know, I was just throwing that out there. And specifically on the instrument for this past evaluation, I do think the teacher and recruitment and retention, the first category, those under reduced teacher vacancies, those descriptives really do need to be updated. For example, highly effective under 4-point vacancies have to decrease by greater than 10%. I think that's probably impossible to obtain. So like we modified, or you guys modified the results in the board as a whole, like under financial oversight, I know we modified, for example, the adhere to budget and the maintain bond rating. And I think the way they're categorized now is excellent. So I think that section under recruitment, teacher recruitment and retention needs to be looked at, especially the teacher vacancy section. I've been on the board 7 years, as many of you know, and so I have been involved with every single one of Dr. Rodriguez's evaluations. The first evaluation was actually our former superintendent, and that was Dr. Moss. And I've mentioned this publicly several times. It was much more of an open discussion with an attorney present, taking notes, came back and met with the board a second time. The attorney did a few days later, summarizing what board members said. Whereas with Dr. Rodriguez's evaluations, we've tried to make it more numerical, a metric evaluation. And I really think the metric evaluation is far superior. So those are just some of the comments I have. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, are you still on?
Yes, I'm still on. I was listening to Carlton, and he talked about getting out information. And my suggestion is that board members should partner with the county council members and hold meeting in different area of the community, and that's how you can get the information out. When I hear somebody say, "Well, I didn't know about what was going on about the referendum," you know, nobody in my area, or in fact, I would say in district I'm in, and also St. Helena and Beaufort, because we have meetings in the communities. We go to churches. So I think that's one good way of getting the information out. As far as the instrument, we can go into that Monday much more deeper. I still have a problem with teachers are not held responsible when you talk about evaluation, because the superintendent is not in the school. He's not in the classroom. The teachers are. So maybe that's something we need to look at also. Thank you.
Hey, are there any other board members on Dr. Guad, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, but I'll let, if anybody else wants to speak before me.
No, go ahead. Carlton's going to come in too, but his hand came up after yours. So.
Okay, well, thank you. I do think, just the results of the referendum yesterday speak volumes about our superintendent's communication abilities. I've already looked at all the precinct results, and the referendum was supported in every single precinct of Beaufort County, and there are a lot of precincts, and the support ranged anywhere from 58% to a high of 95%. I mean, that to me tells me that communication is happening with our community, or at least it did on that particular issue, the referendum. And I know that wasn't on this year's evaluation, because this year's evaluation ended with the June 30 school year of 23. So it's not easy, obviously, having met multiple times and having what instrument should be used. It's not easy, but I do think, as we all know, that it has to be fair to the superintendent, but it has to be a fair evaluation of his work. Thank you.
Mr. Dallas.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to Madam Chair, who just finished speaking before me. I agree with the teachers being held accountable for the numerical values. And, we've had conversations about that. And I've asked people who are in other areas, how can it be done? And from what I've been told, there's nothing that legally prevents the superintendent from being able to assign that. Now, would there be blowback? Yes, there would. So I understand the political and the employee morale issues around that. But I think it's to really galvanize and unite an organization this large, it has to flow to the person who is really on the front line. So I agree with Mr. Campbell on that. The reason I'm suggesting, and I agree with Mr. Campbell also on board members being active. I think with superintendent and the board members being active, engaging their community, I think that's what really, really sort of pushed it over the top, along with the text messaging, because it appears that hit a new group. And I know there have been conversations for some time about not just communicating with pupils and parents, but also going into that 80% that don't have day-to-day contact with the school. The reason I'm suggesting surveys is because they would not be anecdotal. They wouldn't just come from people I, as a board member, have contact with. It would go to a statistically valid group, and that data would show us how the larger community perceives us and what they're aware of. So that was why I was suggesting that. And again, the effort and the results are truly a result of just a Herculean effort by the superintendent and by other, board members and staff and what have you. But it was a small sample group relative to an election had this occurred next year. And I would be cautious that we could be surprised as more people who are animated by other issues go to vote, whereas they did not vote this time. So I like the moving towards a more numerical approach, and so that it's really objective. The last thing is on surveys. Quite often you'll see a odd scale, particularly a 5-point scale. That's because human nature, we hate to sort of be ambivalent. And a lot of times people would drift towards, if it's a 5-point scale, whatever the 3 rating is or the 4 rating. So, we'd have to change what the definition of those are. But a lot of times research analysts try to go to an odd number scale. 5 points seems to be the most favorite. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I think all of this is really excellent feedback. Some of it overlaps, some of it is in competition, but that's okay. That's what a board does. I think I agree with Dr. Guads. I'd like to come out with some type of recommendation. So Ms. Gordon, that's you and me. So suit up. And what I hear in general is, how it's a little bit what we evaluate, but I think a lot of the frustration is how we evaluate it numerically, anecdotally. How do we put those columns in? What does it mean to be highly effective? And just real quickly to respond to Mr. Dallas, there is, and I don't know if you've seen it, because I think it comes at the end of the year, they do a big school climate survey that's for teachers. It's not the community, but it's a large, and they get a lot of good data out of that. Alice Walton presents that. And last year, I think she did it around November, December. And we did have a couple of surveys in the last year that we have pushed out to the community online. And I think we had it was not high turnout, but it wasn't too bad. And I think we can probably pull up that data and look at how maybe we can make that reach more people. So we do have some survey data, but I'm with you. I'm a big fan of surveys as opposed to numeric standards. So a couple of things as far as making a recommendation. And I have some questions. It sounds to me, and this is my observation from watching old videos, that really a lot of this, the numbers that were put in, the student achievement, teacher recruitment and retention, and the financial piece, there wasn't a ton of discussion on the numbers. That's what Mr. Colonel Geyer said, that basically they kind of came up with some numbers to get it started. So I think that's an excellent place to kind of focus on, 4 or 5 years later, post-pandemic learning loss, reevaluating the measurable components of evaluation. And then my question too is on the professional standards of educational leaders, and that we've got here in the what do they call it, there's the measurable components. It's the professional practice. That's right. Okay, so the professional practice components, I absolutely think that should be higher than 45%. That's really, to me, where the rubber meets the road in terms of how you're evaluating the superintendent. The professional standards for educational leadership have appeared to have changed since this was done. They now include, I think, 10 standards. So I don't know if we want to look at that and say we should, and again, our OEs, we can tie our OEs into the different standards. So professional standards for educational leaders, according to the National Education Association, what is it? The National Professional NPBEA. Standard number 1, mission, vision, and core values. I mean, that's a great thing to evaluate a superintendent on. And I do think that we have OEs we could tie into that. Standard number 2, ethics and professional norms. Standard number 3, equity and cultural responsiveness. And it kind of goes through, you can read all 10 of them. And I can email this out too for people to read over the weekend. We also have what I find really an interesting thing to consider is there are superintendent standards, which is even more sort of focused in on evaluation of a superintendent rather than just professional educators. And the superintendent standards, according to the American Association of Superintendents, or the AASA, the American Association of School Administrators, they have superintendent standards, and they have 8. Standard number 1, leadership and district culture. Standard number 2, policy and governance. Standard number 3, communication and community relations, organizational management, curriculum planning, instructional management. So do we want to even think about or consider updating the standards of the professional practice rating? And just briefly, could you guys give me a sense of, you think it's something that we can do or should do, or if it's something that we're already committed to for 23-24? Starting with you, Ms. Gordon.
Well, I think since we're starting we've already into the 23-24, that we can look at it, but make the changes or recommendations for the 24-25. I think this gives the board an opportunity to have some discussion and for us to do a professional job ourselves in looking at the standards, how we rank our superintendent. So I'm not opposed to it, but I think we should do it for the 24-25 year, but do our research and recommendations the 23-24 year.
Okay. Mr. Carlton Dallas, I know you got to leave. You want to vote real quick?
Yes, ma'am. I strongly agree with Ms. Gordon. I think let's sort of make some minor recommendations. I would suggest the committee make some minor recommendations on Monday. There are things that we will be looking at in target 24-25. And I think a huge thing is that a large, massive strategic review of how we might need to, reconfigure and look at how do we rate and evaluate, how do we redeploy assets in areas that seem to make a difference. As far as the standards that these organizations, I always like to know, is there a statistical correlation among the percentage of people who have those standards and the performance of that school district? Now, you would have to normalize it for things such as demographic composition and income and what have you. But if there's been some analysis that says the more members of the school district who have these 8 standards, you mentioned one of them had 8 standards, Madam Chair, does that school necessarily the students perform better when you normalize for demographic differences? And if so, then yes. But if there's no clear correlation or causation between the presence of those 8 standards and performance, then I say let's just make the whole evaluation process simpler. He spends a lot of time putting that together. The booklet was superb because it showed so much that has happened that I didn't know about, and I'm pretty certain that a large percentage of the public doesn't know about. So I think there's benefit to that. But in terms of moving the school district forward to becoming number 1 in the whole country, I think we need to focus more on what the output and results are. And if it's okay, ma'am, I'll take my leave now. And thank you all for listening. I'm sorry I have to go.
No, that was good. Good feedback. Thank you. Dr. Gwads.
I think what Chloe and Carlton have already said is very reasonable. I do think for this school year that we're currently that is currently underway, I would just suggest trying to tweak what we already have a little more, and then go on for the 24-25 year with perhaps a different strategy or more modifications. And I like, Ingrid, that the 8 components of evaluating a superintendent, whatever, those may already be incorporated into what we have, but just a little differently. So it may just be kind of reworking.
Well, and let me tell you where my
Yeah.
thoughts are. I think there's kind of 3 sections to this review. There's the professional practice standards. There is the matrix, I hate to use that word, metric. There is the way we evaluate it. So that's the effectiveness criteria, right? How are we determining highly effective? Because those are 2 different things. And then there's the measurable components. So that's what I was kind of trying to structure this towards. And Mr. Campbell, I did not get your input. So raise your hand if you want to. I don't want to move on with you, but I have a sense that that's where the board is. We're going to leave the actual components of professional practice alone, and the student achievement, teacher retention and recruitment, and financial piece, like the categories on which we are evaluating him alone. We're going to keep those the same. Where we might tweak, where we might make a recommendation, I think, is on the effectiveness columns. And I think that's something they can do in January. We don't have to do that today, but look really hard at whether we want to put, to Ms. Gordon's point, a difference between, a 3 and a 4, making it clearer so that it's easier to do. And I know Victor Ney even suggested we have a 3.5, or something. Like maybe we go to Mr. Carlton Dallas's 5-point scale, but that's maybe a tweak, because as long as Dr. Rodriguez knows the categories that he's being evaluated on, that's what's important here in October or November as it is. And then the other piece is that measurable components. And that's where I think we need to focus in, and that's the part probably I struggled with the most in terms of this evaluation. And I think one thing, and I quickly, because we want to set this up and make a recommendation for Monday. So we want to have the whole conversation here. Would you guys quickly weigh in with me? I would recommend that his professional practice rating be at I would recommend 80% of his evaluation be professional practice and 20%, or I could do 75 or 25. That's where I'm at. Can you guys just give me an idea of how you might change the weighting between professional practice and measurable components? Ms. Gordon? So the measurable components were that kind of subsection where we had,
No, go ahead.
No, just say, so there's 2 different groups, right? The professional practice is all this professional standards with the kind of more governance and board relations, and it had A1, A2, A3, A4. That's the professional practice rating. The measurable components are those 3 things that the board back in 2019 was trying to actually get a measurement on: academic achievement, teacher recruitment and retention, and financial oversight. So between the professional practice and the measurable components, how would you weigh that?
I'm concerned with the 80% for that piece, and that's just me. I think that's
give me a
relatively
recommendation.
high, but I think, and I think it doesn't give us a balance with the others. So I would probably be leaning more towards a 55-45.
55 professional practice, 45.
Yes,
okay.
45 the others.
Okay. Dr. Watts, do you have just start giving me some numbers so we can start thinking about it?
So let me just say, so we have the instrument here for what we just used last month. The prior year, the professional practice component was 85%, and the financial oversight measurable component was 15%. So knowing that and what you guys have said, I probably would say, I kind of thought off the top of my head, maybe, yes, 65-75% should be the professional practice, as opposed to components, as opposed to right now it says it was 45.
Okay.
And then I think under the others, the measurable components, student achievement, financial oversight, and teacher recruitment and vacancies, that one. Let's see how these are weighted. I would probably have student achievement and financial oversight is weighted more than the teacher recruitment and retention, because I think he has kind of that's probably the way I would do it.
And I think another piece of this, I'd like to see if Barbara Nielsen chaired, who is a Hilton Head resident, chaired a committee that has released a report on teacher recruitment and retention. And I think that that's something we can put on an agenda item because they really found, it's interesting, they found that pay was not the biggest driver of teacher recruitment and retention. And it really looks at what would actually motivate or improve teacher recruitment and retention. And it doesn't really tie in at all to sort of our matrix, right? Because one of the things that talking about assessments, Barbara Nielsen was saying the way South Carolina, the SC Ready report card does it is so deeply flawed, they're going to overhaul it. And because it's causing a problem with teacher vacancies and whatnot. So I will also send out that white paper, memorandum, whatever they call it, from the South Carolina Department of Education to review, because when we get ready to do the teacher recruitment and retention, I think that should be a part of it, since they did the whole task force across the state. So, okay, so we've got 55, 45, 60, 65 to 75, and then 80-20. So we're going to, Mr. Gamble, did you want to have a vote on the weighting between professional practice components and measurable components?
I'm good with what y'all have. I'm gonna come over it. I don't have a problem.
I love that. Okay. Just leave the women in charge, right, Mr. Gamble? Like, we'll just sort it out.
He knows who's boss.
That's right. All right. So then let's put a pin in that for a minute. So then we've got the three different, because I think we would probably all agree, although pop in if you disagree, that of those professional practice, there's 5 items, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we would weight those all the same. So whatever the number we come up with, we divide by 5 and each section gets the same. I don't think there's one section that we would necessarily want to overrate. Does anyone object to that? Okay.
I probably would have just left the weighting categories unchanged.
Yeah, that's what I'm, oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Because they're weighted slightly differently.
And I didn't even really realize that.
Yeah.
I agree with
I would just
Dr.
leave that.
Block.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with leaving that. Ms. Gordon. I mean, just listening to feedback, I might weight community relations a little bit more.
Where is that? Okay. Well, you know what? Sorry.
Ms. Gordon.
You know, the community relations, everywhere I went, we got dinged on that. So you're right. I mean, they were not upset, but they were saying that there's just not enough communications coming out of the district to the community. And we could do better in making sure that they know what's going on, or at least make an effort. So yes, but where would you take, what would you decrease if you take community relations and increase it?
To me, it's all, I would have weighted them all the same. But we can put that up for a vote. Maybe that's one recommendation.
You know what? I'm fine with that too. I was just trying to make it simple. Hey,
no, I'm with you. I didn't realize. I thought they were all the same. So sorry.
Yeah,
shame on me as the
so they'd be each worth 20%.
Yep. I've been so focused on the measurable components. Okay, so we'll put a pin on that for a second, because that's maybe they can tweak that in January. The measurable components of the evaluation. So Dr. Guads, you said student achievement and financial would be equal and weighted more heavily than teacher. Does that line up with what you're thinking, Chloe, or would you like to see them all weighted the same, or what do you think?
Well, I repeat that again, because
yeah, so that right now, Dr. Guad's recommendation, and we're not making recommendations, we're all just throwing out our hopes and dreams. That student achievement and financial would be weighted more heavily than teacher recruitment and retention. Because of, I think Dr. Guaz, I might be putting words in your mouth, but because it's such a problematic thing to sort of really, look at the vacancy decreasing by 10%. I think we definitely need to change that to begin with.
Exactly.
Or we could leave them all at, I don't know if you want, if you like that paradigm, Ms. Gordon, or if you would like to see them all weighted equally, or if there's another one you think that should really have extra weight in the evaluation.
I think I'll abstain right now. I think because my head is moving into how that looks. Sure, we want teacher retention to be higher. I mean, for us to retain teachers, but I know that's difficult right now. Okay, I tell you what, I think I'll just leave that the way it is. When you look at the fact that, I don't know, I just have a problem with kind of holding Miss Alice and that team for something that they have no control of, which is when teachers want to leave, they leave, or they don't want to come here, they don't come here. And I think that they do a fabulous job of trying to recruit teachers. But I think one of the problems that we have in that area is the timing. When we actually go out and recruit teachers, a lot of the states have already started and hired people that we would have hired. So,
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So,
you know, I think I'll just,
it sounds to me though, like you're in favor of making that a less of an impact on Dr. Rodriguez evaluation, because like you said,
yes,
from your point of view, Ms. Walton is working really, really hard, and the superintendent's not impeding that in any way. And it kind of,
no,
and I think that does tie into this white paper from the teacher recruitment and retention, that there's so many external forces that we can't control. So, okay. That sounds good to me.
So how about, Chair,
yes, Ms. Chair.
right.
Madam Chair,
What
Dr.
about, well, we could have like maybe financial oversight recommendation be, excuse me, the teacher thing, 10%. And then the other two, let's say if the other two were 15% each, the finance and the achievement, or maybe the achievement should be 20, go 20, 15, and 10, something like that. That would turn out to be, well, that would be 45%. So then the professional component would be 55. I think that professional component should be higher. So
I do too. The other thing
Yeah.
is, you got to think about with student achievement, we have 30% if we keep the weighting the way it is on instructional leadership. And to me, that captures
I
more
know
of the-
exactly. And that's an advantage of leaving it the way it is, because it puts more emphasis on that.
I'd actually like to recommend, and I know I'll meet some resistance, so please feel free to speak your mind. I'm just saying 10, 10, and 5. That's 25. And then the professional practice, because all these things are really also being counted in the professional practice, the standards. So if we did that, and if we left the weighting the way it is now on the professional practice, I feel like we're going to run out of brain power on this pretty soon.
Yeah, that's not
that,
good.
that overweights instructional leadership. It overweights governance, which I think is key, and it overweights financial. And what I might do is say, let me throw this out here and then we can tweak it. What if we did 75% professional practice and we left instructional leadership at 30%, but we took maybe business and finance, since it's already its own special thing, we could take some of the weight off of that, since it's basically, that's the most measurable thing that we do, right? It's measured externally and audited all the time. We could move that and tweak, add 5% to community relations and 5% to staff relations. So that would make it, Robin, it's bouncing all over the place. That would make it 20% government, A 20%, B 20%, C 20%, business and finance 10, instructional leadership 30. Then we could, that would be, and then the total weight would be 75%. Then we could do 10, 10, and 5 on the measurable components. How dramatic does that sound to people?
Say that again. So,
Okay, so
so under professional practice, under the government's, these 5 right here, you would do
20, 20, 20, 20, I mean, 20, 20, 20, 10, 30. That gives additional weighting to the instructional leadership, which is the feedback we hear from multiple board members, that we don't necessarily want to drill down on the results, numeric results, as much as we want to drill down on the instructional leadership component. Then the student achievement results would be 10, teacher retention and recruitment, which I think after you guys read this paper, you'll see is a pretty challenging metric in general across the state, would be still at 5. And the finance piece would get an extra 10% total weighting in his evaluation. Would that be, I mean, it's a little higher than you want, Chloe, but I think it may not be where we ultimately land. Would you be able to support that as a recommendation for discussion?
Yes.
Dr. Watts, do you see any issues with that as a recommendation coming out of this committee?
So Robin, can you please scroll back to the, yeah, there. Okay, thank you. Okay, so you're saying switch them to 20, 20, 20,
10, 30.
10, 30. Yeah, I'm not in favor of that because I think that downplays business and finance too much, which I think is very important. So I would either go for leaving it the way it is, or just do 20% for all of them. I think I would be more comfortable with that. And I do like Ingrid, your recommendation. So then do this as 75% the professional practice, and then we said 10, 10, 5, right, for the others.
Yeah, and I actually am in favor of a 20% all the way down as well. My only caveat was if we're going to reduce the academic achievement piece to 10%, saying, but we're overweighing instructional leadership at 30. So I think either model works. Let's just have, if you're okay with it, Chloe, let's just have as a starting point for discussion, a recommendation for discussion to the full board that we're going to leave the categories unchanged. We're going to leave the standards that we evaluated him and the measurable components unchanged, right? Those are the things that are already in there. We're going to leave up to the committee that will form in January to fine tune determinations of effectiveness, right? So they can look at that and really spend some time looking at how they're going to decide, because he already knows what he's being judged on. Or we could just leave it the way it is. And that the real recommendation coming out is we're going to adjust the weighting, 75% professional practice, 10% student achievement, 5% teacher recruitment, and 10% finance. Yes, Ms. Gordon.
I don't have a problem with this being for discussionable item. I just still think 75% is a little bit too high for professional practice, and our measurable components being, that low. But for discussionable item, I'll go along with that, and then we'll see what the board comes up with.
Robin, I'm going to make the motion, which is always a bad idea, but there's just 2 of us. So I'm the worst motion maker on the board. But we'll phrase it is that we move that I make a motion to recommend for discussion to the full board a change in the superintendent's weighting for the 2023-2024 school year to 75% weighting for professional practices, 10% measurable student achievement, 5% measurable teacher recruitment and retention, and 10% measurable finance. And I will, and Dr. Gwadz, if you'll allow me, I'll present that at this meeting, even though it's, as like almost a committee report, and we'll kind of highlight some of the discussion we've had here. And I'm going to send out that task force recommendation on teacher recruitment and retention and recruitment, as well as I might send out the just some of the other standards so people understand kind of what's going on out there. But we'll leave the standards alone for right now.
That sounds real good. So, Chloe, are you going to second that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I second that motion.
Make sure it says if recommended for discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
The following proposal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with that. Thank you. I second that motion.
Perfect. So all in favor?
Aye.
2-0.
So I got another question for you, Ingrid.
Yeah,
and that is, and Chloe, now scroll down, please, Robin, to the teacher part there. Yeah. So I do think the bottom one, the reduce the number of short-term substitute days, is okay the way it is, but I really think this has to be changed, the reduced teacher vacancies. So it just seems kind of crazy that, minimally effective is the vacancies increase 1 to 5%. And then ineffective is they increase more than 5%. Effective is the vacancy rate is not changing, and then the highly effective is way out there. The vacancies decreased by greater than 10%. So I don't know if we need to have like Alice give suggestions for this based on, I don't know what those vacancy percentages are off the top of my head or whatever. I definitely think the 4 category is not correct. And I don't know if the other ones are good or not.
Well, and if you read this paper, it really does say that the teacher vacancy rate, you can't have a vacancy decrease by 10% when you're outperforming every other district, but their, vacancies increasing by 20% and ours only increasing by 2%.
Yeah. Okay.
Robin's done. So what we could do is just make a motion to vacate what we did with the academic achievement piece, which was trying to line it up with the coherent governance model, which I hope is something that, we'll talk about more in the 2024-2025 evaluation. We could go into that sort of saying, are we making reasonable progress towards reducing teacher vacancies? Are we, in other words, is the superintendent in our judgment as elected officials doing enough, right? Or do we want numerical values? Or we could just say we vacate the current, numeric numbers pending another discussion. So, Ms. Gordon, what do you think?
Okay, I'm confused. I like Dr. Quaz's recommendation that Miss Alice takes this piece and come in and give us some information. And I say that because I know that, one day we had about 457 vacancies of people coming to work that day. So what are we looking at? And are we looking at vacancies in terms of, teachers, getting teachers in positions or in administrators or whatever? I would like to hear from Miss Alice, and I agree. These numbers don't make any sense to me. Greater than, less than, well, I mean, whatever. Who determines that, and how do we keep up with that? So I want to hear from Miss Alice before we make that recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, so then why don't we make a motion to recommend vacating the teacher recruitment and retention matrix until we can have further discussions. Although the only thing is, I hate to have the impression. Let's just make a motion that we recommend vacating the current effectiveness columns for teacher recruitment and retention in order to obtain further information. Because I don't want the public to get the idea that Miss Walton's going to tell us what she can do, and then that, So why don't we just vacate them and say we're going to look into it further. And then we'll go ahead and set up and have, Miss Walton does her OE4 presentation in December, and it was very fulsome last year. It was a 2-hour long where she went through every piece of the HR and all those numbers. And she brought in, I think, like 7 or 8 staff members who presented. So
she's actually doing that at the operations meeting on the 29th.
Okay, and I can even say, I'll make the following motion, if you don't mind, Ms. Gordon, that we recommend for discussion to the Board of Education vacating the numerical values in the teacher recruitment and retention measurable component until, see how I want to say this, while reviewing recommendations from the teacher recruitment and retention task force, or, reviewing findings. Or how about this? To align with findings from the State Department of Education Teacher Retention and Recruitment Task Force.
A second.
I can email you something. Do you have it more or less?
Yeah, I'm working on
Recommend
it.
for discussion to vacate the current numerical value or numeric matrix on teacher recruitment and retention in order to review the findings of the State Department of Education's Teacher Recruitment and Retention Task Force.
Okay.
Computer says no. Okay. So you second that, Ms. Gordon?
I second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's two
Yeah.
motions coming out of this committee. And I think that's about all we can manage.
I think you did a great job.
All right. All right. So, Dr. Watts, at the meeting, I'll just make this like a committee report with our two motions, and then we'll just run it as a regular special called meeting.
That sounds great.
Okay. Unless there's any further business before this committee, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
All right. You guys have a great weekend. See you Monday.